My heart sinks a little bit every time I think about this story. There's still so much shock over this past weekend's death of actor Malcolm-Jamal Warner. He was vacationing in Costa Rica when he drowned, and his family has expressed deep grief, but also gratitude for an outpouring of support. Warner's journey made its way here to Atlanta, where he lived for a good while. He became an important and loved presence in our city. He starred in the hospital TV drama The Resident, a show based on an Atlanta hospital and filmed here in the A. And he performed jazz and spoken word many times across the metro. Here to dive into that part of Warner's life story is AJC Entertainment reporter Rodney Ho. Rodney, I love following your work, and it's really good to see you again. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, it's been a minute. I'm so sorry it's under these
I
circumstances.
know. You know, I was thinking back, Rodney, there's so much nostalgia because Thursday night at my house, everything stopped because it was Cosby Show night and nobody was going to miss it. So many of us had that first connection through his role of Theo Huxtable. Would you talk more about the Malcolm-Jamal Warner that Atlanta really came to know in more recent years?
Yeah, I first met him about 20 years ago. There's a woman named Joyce Littell who's a longtime nighttime host at B103, and every year she did a big event called Passion and Poetry, which blended both, mostly poetry and music. And she had met Jamal Warner in New York, and they became friends. And she invited him to come down, and he participated. He loved it so much. Every year he'd come back and host the event, so I got to meet him a couple times. I got to see him live, and extraordinary musician, extraordinary poet. And you realize that you see people as an actor, you see their characters, you realize, oh, they have a lot more layers, and he's got a lot of layers.
Yeah, I'm like, you're among the lucky ones who got to see him in that element. You know, he would describe himself as actor and poet. They would be right on that same line together. Can you tell us more about what that was like, that connection, as he put himself out there for all to see?
I don't know. I think he just brought his humanity. I mean, he grew up like under the spotlight in the 80s in a very sensitive time. You're an adolescent, and he somehow, we always hear the stories about, kid actors who don't grow up and become a mess. And, like Ron Howard and a lot of actors, he adjusted to life after Cosby. I mean, he found plenty of TV roles, and he built his life. And what's interesting is, he moved here about 6, 7 years ago for The Resident, and I get the impression he really liked being semi-anonymous here. I think people treated him with respect, and they didn't treat him like Theo, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's
and
such a hard
yes,
transition for a child actor, like you said, because you don't want to be just kind of stuck in that typecast your whole life. And it's interesting, Rodney, because he hosted, as you know, that podcast called NA stood for Not All Hood, and he looked at the lived experiences and identities of Black people in America. And his most recent episode, he actually talked about that journey as a child actor and evolving from there. And he really talked about being grateful for the direction his life took, and he used the phrase gratitude begets gratitude. And now that really is such maybe a cornerstone of his legacy moving forward, do you think?
absolutely. I think he really understood who he was, grew comfortably into who he is. He was at that point, and it's just such a shame. I feel for his family. And what's interesting is he's very private about his family. For somebody who's so public, he has never released the name of his wife or his daughter's name. So if you could probably Google and look around, but they're probably going to have a very private ceremony. This won't be a big, there won't be some massive public funeral service. I think his family will mourn
Yeah.
privately, and unfortunately for the rest of us, we'll all have to grieve in our own ways.
Yeah, but respect their privacy, and I just can't stop thinking, especially about his wife, his daughter, and everyone who knew him in that intimate way. And maybe on our behalf, we say thank you to them for sharing a small piece of him with the rest of the world. And Rodney, we really appreciate your time as well.